Hey everyone, and welcome to the Balanced Bodies Blueprint. I am your host, Vinny Russo.
And I'm your co-host, Dr. Eryn Stansfield.
And we're shifting gears from all the conventional fitness narrative you hear on most fitness podcasts, as our main emphasis lies in preventative healthcare, adopting a holistic approach to nutrition, and challenging the traditional views on various fitness topics.
Our mission with this podcast is to provide you with the information you need to achieve optimal health.
And on today's podcast, we have a fun podcast set up for you where we are going to go over the top 5 villains of the fitness industry. I know it sounds pretty mean and we might be calling some people out, but we feel like we should be calling them out because they're putting out nonsensical information.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So it might be a little bit of a lengthy episode, so we're going to try to make it as concise as possible. But before we get started, just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Legion Athletics, because they provide science-backed supplements with the research for every ingredient that is in each product. So shout out to them. If you want to use the code RUSSO, RUSSO, at checkout, you could get 20% off of your first time using it and then double the Legion points every time you use it after that. So that being said, I think we had some fun with this one.
I think you had a lot of fun with it.
But we are going to go back and forth. Basically, how this is going to run down. We're going to give like the claims that these people say, and then we'll give a couple of rebuttals to a few of their claims that we mentioned, just to really shed some light on the dark side of this fitness industry. So why don't you start us off with number 5?
All right. So I'm going to make a general statement about this. So just in general, functional providers, and we did an entire episode on this, but basically doing unnecessary testing, especially they seem to target people that have issues losing weight, and I think they also target people that are trying to find quote unquote a root cause for their medical issues, and they promote that they can find that, when in reality it's a lot more complicated than that, and sometimes we really don't know the root causes of a lot of medical issues, and even some resistance to weight loss occasionally. So
I actually got a certification, which is a functional health certification. I don't promote it as that because going through a certification, I really wanted to know, are they going to teach me anything different from what I already know? And a lot of it, when I was going through it, really was like, well, if they have this type of disorder, or if they have this type of issue in their labs, or if they complain about these symptoms, then this is the supplement you use for them. And it just didn't resonate with me. And I remember when I first brought it up and you were asking for like the research, because I had all the files saved and stuff, and I was giving you the research. You're like, yeah, this isn't legitimate research.
yeah, so it was interesting when we first met, because I think this was somebody you actually respected at the
Yeah, no,
time.
I liked him. I still do like him. I don't think he's a bad dude. I just think a lot of the stuff that's being pushed out, it's like I feel like he's really trying to help people. But I also feel like he's benefiting in the pocket with every every issue that arises. There's a supplement to help that issue.
Yeah. And I'm very so I don't know this person. I just know what they put out, the content. And then obviously you shared with me some of the educational material that you got through your course. And I went through some of the literature that was associated with that, and just didn't find great I guess quality of evidence to back up some of the claims that were being made. But I think, when I first started looking at this person, I think the most egregious thing to me was his posts seemed to be preying on a specific patient population, in my opinion, of women who tend to have problems losing weight. And I think a lot of these people that he kind of tailors his message to are looking for a solution, right? They have maybe tried other nutrition plans, they've tried other programs, and maybe they're having issues. And he like kind of introduces himself as this person who can solve that issue. And I don't know that he's solving that issue with some of the content, at least that I've seen that he's putting out. I think the real thing that really got me was when he began to diagnose people with overactive immune disorder, or something he calls OID. And I actually asked him about it in on one of his posts, and he gave me a very generic answer, like, if you want more information, contact their people. And to me, these are people that the audiences are people that are looking for something, an answer. And when you coin a disorder that's not actually a medical disorder and there's no literature on it, then I think you get into a space of being out of your lane. Uh,
I think that's what really like kind of got you on like a kick to go against like you're very against this guy. And
yeah.
we used to have talks where I was like, yeah, I mean, I get it, but I think he's a good guy. And you're like, it doesn't matter how good he is. If he could be a good human being, but what he's doing is he's preying on these type of people. And when you would ask him questions, you're like, see, he doesn't respond to my questions because there is no legitimate answer to what I'm asking him.
Yeah. And I really, I feel, because I've seen these patients in my office, right? Like people that are desperate to find answers to what is going on with them medically, and to actually, come up with a disease state that doesn't really exist in the medical literature, I think is malpractice, essentially.
Yeah.
So the other thing he does is he seems to be prone to treat subclinical thyroid disease, at least from what I can, garner from his posts. And, again, that in, mainstream medicine is not clinically indicated. None of, the endocrine society, none of the actual medical societies recommend something like that. There's like very specific guidelines for people that maybe have had their thyroid completely removed, where you would get some of the testing that is recommended by some of these functional providers, where you'd actually get like maybe a T3 level and maybe treat, some subclinical stuff. But in general, if you have a thyroid gland and it is functioning normally, some of the testing that's even done isn't clinically indicated at all for these people. And then to treat them on top of that. And I'm talking about over-the-counter supplements sometimes that they're treating with that have, for example, pig thyroid, or some other thyroid hormone from an animal. And, patients or people are getting this, and that might not be necessary. So I would just be very cautious about the advice, especially from this particular person.
Yeah, and functional providers in general, and even functional health coaches. But what really not want to be associated with that is more or less how they love to say like special, like doctors with specialties like endocrinologists can't figure this out, but we did. You didn't figure it out. Like you have an endocrinologist with over 13 years of study and experience in hormones in general, and you're saying you know more than them. That doesn't make sense to me. Even if it was a functional coach and was like, yeah, my doctor can't figure this out, but I figured it out. You didn't figure anything out. Like it just feels very, very slimy to me, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to look at the business behind it as well, I think, and what the intention is.
And he is a very, very good business person. Very good. But let's move on. Let's not spend so much time on functional providers. Let's go to number 4, and his name. You start off telling us a little bit about him, but his name is Eddie Abu.
All right. So he's a fear monger that tells you to stay away from milk. You can eat cheese, which seems counterintuitive. Fruit, because it's sugar, quote unquote, and tells you to stay away from certain nuts like cashews, and oats because they're bad for weight loss. Whey protein because it's not real,
Yeah,
which actually I saw something today where he actually has supplements that he sells, like
yep.
creatine and
And
glutamate.
yeah.
So those, but those are okay.
Yeah,
because he sells them.
and his claims go on, but it really caught my attention when he started to talk about how you don't need a calorie deficit because calories don't count. He mentioned something about like you can like the only way that an egg is a complete protein is if you eat the whole thing. So egg whites aren't considered a complete protein. One of my favorites was about how fat loss isn't about calories; it's all about controlling your insulin. And then I thought I didn't know if you saw this or not, but he said why would I debate? Someone told him or asked him, like, why don't you bring doctors on and debate them? And he said, why would I debate doctors? They don't know shit. So, but let's,
I mean, that would seem typical from a, meathead that didn't even win the Olympia PS.
oh, wow.
And
Taking shots, taking shots.
it seems typical.
Yeah. I mean, if he listens to this and wants to have a debate with you, I would love that and just be the mediator.
I like equal debates where somebody is actually
Yeah, it wouldn't be too equal. It'd be a quick debate. But let's talk about a few of those claims. Like, for example, the avoid the milk, but cheese is okay. Dairy products in general, like especially milk, it's actually part of a healthy diet. And milk is a really, really good source of calcium and protein and a lot of other essential nutrients. So unless you're lactose intolerant, you should have dairy, right? You should have dairy, and because you're not going to have any issues with it. When you demonize food and you remove entire food groups without any medical reason, it just doesn't really make that much sense to me.
Yeah, and the other claim that, I mentioned earlier where he's talking about fruit and sugar, and he goes into insulin control, which first off, I have to say again, a meathead lecturing you about physiology, I don't think is necessarily his area of expertise. And to attribute very simplistically, one thing to weight or fat loss um, is simple-minded,
Ignorant.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there are so many factors besides insulin control, right, related to fat loss. They include genetics, metabolic rate, macro, micronutrients, diet, hormones. And I think we are increasingly understanding how food cravings are upregulated in obesity, but there's so much still to learn, about gut hormones, adipose tissue, the gut microbiome and how that regulates appetite. And then, the hypothalamus, and even like gut dysbiosis. How does that play into obesity? So it's a lot more complicated than saying this is about insulin control. For example, there are about 400 genes that are associated with type 2 diabetes. And those genes have been found to only predict about 5% of obesity risk. So we are in the very early stages of understanding how obesity is very multifactorial,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah, and you said it before, like he's a meathead. I wouldn't say that all meatheads are ignorant. We're not saying that. We're
That's
just
true.
saying his claims because there are a lot of, especially professional bodybuilders out there that know how to train, are really, really smart in those aspects, especially with nutrition. A lot of them are. This guy just seems not to be. And he's a professional bodybuilder, and all he does, like his other claim about calories, no calorie deficit is necessary. Um, in order for him to get his body to where it had to be to compete in the Olympia, he had to go into a deficit to lose body fat. It's like and then like you go into a surplus in the off season, and he's one who had to do that in order to compete. Now, when you talk about losing weight in general, the whole principle of energy balance, that is the cornerstone of this weight management, right? To lose weight, you need to create an energy deficit, meaning you need to consume fewer calories than you burn. And in order to gain weight, you got to go into a surplus, which is consuming more calories than you burn. Right now, the food quality, which he likes to promote, even though he demonizes a lot of food, that is still important. But it's really the caloric intake that plays the biggest role in controlling your weight.
Yeah. And then obviously his other claim to disregard doctor's advice. Listen, I get that a lot of people don't like doctors. I totally understand that. I've been on the patient side of things, and I don't mean to generalize meatheads, as you said, there are some very intelligent people out there that do bodybuild and actually know physiology. I feel like those people tend to stay in their lane and give appropriate advice if they are qualified. But to disregard a physician's advice who has spent a good, I've spent a good third of my life training essentially to become a physician, like, undergrad, medical school, learning how to read research. And it's all, our advice is based on evidence. And really, I think that if you don't trust a doctor, at least find somebody who can interpret the research for you so that you can take that data and make informed decisions. But really look at qualified professionals. I understand that he has a great physique and maybe a lot of people look up to that, but that does not mean that he is qualified to give out advice to everybody.
Yeah, just because you have a six-pack don't mean everything about health and fitness. But it's funny because you talk about people being apprehensive to listening to doctors, and a lot of it is like, oh, well, it's because they're in cahoots with big pharma, like you guys actually get a kickback or something.
Yeah, I wish we did. I'd be a hell of a lot richer. Or if I made a magic supplement that I sold everybody, I'd be like, listen, this will fix you.
Yeah.
I would be rolling in dope.
Yeah, big there's no kickback for every prescription she gives out. They give her a kickback. It doesn't work like that. But overall, Eddie's claims that they lack scientific evidence. They contradict established nutrition principles, and following his advice could lead to disordered eating, and can actually hinder your progress towards your health and fitness goals. So that was number 4. Let's go, and this is going in order, like the top 5. So number 3 in the middle of the pack is everybody's favorite carnivore diet person.
This is good. This is a doctor that we're talking about. An
Mr.
actual
Paul Saladino, MD. He's a fear-monger who likes to pick out food that he really wants to demonize. And then what he does is he finds like this isolated compound in that food to where, like, if you're given that compound crazy high doses, it will actually cause problems. So he does that, he takes that, and then he concludes that the said food with that compound is bad because it contains that compound.
Yeah, and basically he promotes a carnivore diet or meat only diet, and he says to avoid vegetables and fruits. And I thought this was funny because the vegetables and fruits don't want to be eaten. So, I don't know that animals want to be eaten either, but anyway, and then he says stuff about diet drinks and how they don't help with weight loss, and they can interrupt satiety and insulin signaling and glucose and affect glucose tolerance. He's also said some things like oatmeal is bad for you.
A lot of them say this oatmeal is bad for you.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of his research comes from rodents. So, if you're a mouse, maybe that makes sense. I didn't know mice were carnivores. So,
Well, it's funny because, like, if you look at like Lane Norton's Instagram, a lot of it is this Paul Saladino, and he's always like human randomized control trials, and it's like the biggest thing against Paul. But I actually saw a video of him recently, where he was in Greece and he was advocating for the Mediterranean diet. And he was like, yeah, they eat a bunch of red meat, they eat olives, they eat fruit, they only have some vegetables. And what he's doing is he's trying to make it seem like like Greece, which is a pretty healthy nation, like they eat just like he does. But if you look at the Mediterranean diet, like the serving of meat is literally like 1 to 2 servings of meat. The bulk of their diet is made up of cereal, grains, potatoes, legumes, and mainly vegetables. And these are all things that he actually tells you to avoid. But let's go into a few of his claims. One of them being the demonizing foods based on their isolated compounds. When you focus on an isolated compound in food and you exaggerate the potential harm, he's doing that and ignoring the overall nutritional context as well as the human body's metabolic processes. When he does that, you got to take a look at it. You got to say, well, what's going on? Why are you just taking one? Like, food isn't just one isolated compound. It's a bunch of compounds together, right? So when he does that, it's a very flawed approach to trying to figure out what to eat and what not to eat. When you are choosing these foods to consume, you should consider the entire nutritional profile of the food, because that's what's really going to tell you about the impact it's going to have on the health when you look at an overall balanced diet.
Yeah, and then, as we alluded to previously, this carnivore diet, one of his claims is that it can actually prevent autoimmune diseases and digestive disorders and mental health disorders. Wow, I wish it were that easy.
Yeah.
But there are,
But imagine having an autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's and being like, oh wow, the carnivore diet's gonna save my life. Imagine that. Like,
yeah, but that's again, that's misinformation, right?
I know.
Because
That's what I'm saying. Like they're gonna be like, oh, let me do it, and then they don't get help, and they
yeah.
rather listen to him than
And
going
that's the thing.
to.
I would think if you're consuming a bunch of red meat, especially, you're going to increase your cardiovascular risk. So, and again, there's multiple studies looking at the opposite claim, right? So there was a review put out in 2014 that showed an increased risk of chronic disease with red and processed meats. Okay, so this was out in the literature in humans, not in mice. So a high consumption can lead to higher prevalences of even some cancers, right? Diet-related chronic disease is again multifactorial. If there's any clinic or provider or influencer that's giving you a simple black and white answer, they are wrong. It's wrong because physiology is so much more complicated than one black and white answer.
Mhm.
If that were true, if they had the one simple answer, then we wouldn't have an obesity problem, period.
Yeah.
Because everyone would follow the same advice, that, the simplistic answer, but that's not the case. So most chronic diseases are multifactorial. For example, they've looked at different studies. There's like 10 different deregulated metabolic parameters that could play into chronic disease, including antioxidant status, acid-base imbalance, increased inflammation, impaired carbohydrate, lipid, carbon metabolism, impaired functioning of neurons and DNA transcription, hypertension, and even modified digestive microflora. So the point is that there's so many more factors that play into chronic disease. And so if there's somebody out there, whether it's this MD or an influencer that you really trust, that's saying that there's one answer to solve your autoimmune disease or your chronic disease state, they're typically wrong.
Yeah. I remember there was a guy on TikTok and I made a comment on his video. He's like, I'm doing the carnivore diet. I lost 35 pounds and my knee pain has gone away completely. And he's relating it to the carnivore diet. I'm like, dude, does it have anything to do with the 35 pounds you lost? Do you
Yeah.
think maybe that had effect on your joints? But touching quickly back on what you kept mentioning about how he really does rodent studies. Animal studies, they can provide some pretty good insights, but they can't directly be extrapolated to humans because there's a significant physiological difference between mice, rodents, other animals, bacteria, and ourselves. So what Dr. Eryn's trying to get across and what Lane Norton always tries to get across is you need to prioritize these human studies when you're evaluating any type of dietary
Not only
recommendations.
that, but there's specific types of human studies, right? Which is what one of my pet peeves with nutrition data. It's randomized control studies. And that is our strongest, um, evidence-based advice method,
Yeah.
right? Looking at these studies, that is sort of towards the top tier of what we look at when we make a recommendation to a patient. And there's a hierarchy of research, and so when you start out, it might not start out as randomized control studies. Sometimes these studies start out as observational studies. I'm not knocking those, but I'm saying if you're actually going to take advice, make sure that it is the right advice and that it comes from evidence that has been tested in humans and that has been compared to a different group, like a placebo group, for
Yeah,
example.
it's very, very hard to run those because of number one, how long it's got to be and how much control you have to have over human life. It's almost to the point to where it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's
Well, there's a lot of confounding factors with
It's inhumane. That's the word I was looking for.
well, that's why there's the IRB,
Yeah.
which is a board that actually looks at making sure that humans are well treated in these studies. But anyway, to get back to the point, Paul claims basically lack solid scientific grounding, and they misrepresent or exaggerate research findings. And a lot of those times, the research findings are not in humans. So I think that the meat only diet or the carnivore diet contradicts the vast evidence supporting health benefits of a balanced diet. So having vegetables, fruits, you want a balance. You don't want to just say this food group is the best food group.
Yeah. All right. So that was number 3. We're getting down to the top 2. Eryn, why don't you start us with number 2?
Oh, this guy, Dave Asprey.
Yeah.
Is that how you say his last name? I know that you don't like this person.
Yeah.
So I think that every time you see a video, you get very upset
Yeah.
about
Well,
him.
it's his mannerisms too. It's like he's very condescending when he talks and he thinks he knows everything like this. Yeah, so he really grinds my gears with a lot of the shit he says.
Yeah. And he's the one that says that you should put butter in your coffee and that the body will burn more fat that way.
Yeah. Well, that got his claim to fame was bulletproof coffee, where you just put a stick of fucking butter in your coffee and start your day that way.
And to be fair, I think my mom actually bought the bulletproof coffee and she loves it, but
It might taste good
not
because of the fat.
recommended.
Yeah, it might taste. I never tried it, but it might taste good because of the amount of fat in it. But it's not going to help your body burn more fat.
Yeah, and then he's known for the term biohacking. I think he's one of the first people that may have used that. If anything, I would have, trademarked that.
Yeah, he ain't that smart. But he states things like eating fries is worse than smoking cigarettes due to the inflammation that it causes in the body. That like phytic acid, lectins, and oxalates, they all are like workers for the devil, and anything with those compounds should be avoided as it leaches the body of nutrients. He is another one who hates oats, like poor oats. Like oats are getting stomped on by these people. And yeah, duh. But he labels oats as like peasant food, which how demeaning is that? Like, I'm a peasant because I eat oats.
Well, he
Like,
did say he's condescending.
yes, yes. And then the best is like he also like he's actually pretty lean right now.
Is he?
He's actually pretty lean right now. I'll say that.
Like pictures with his shirt on?
No, he was doing a video with his shirt off. I was like, all right, he's kind of lean. But he was sitting on a bunch of podcasts. He's like, yeah, I stay at 7% year round. I'm like, I've took my body to 7%. You're not staying there year round, plain and simple. So I just thought that was pretty funny. But let's go into his claims. Like the main claim to fame here, butter in your coffee for fat burning. The only thing that butter in your coffee is going to add or do for your body is going to add calories. That's legitimately that's it. His idea was that he put out there was that your body turns to burning more fat right away because that's what it's initially ingesting. But what he doesn't understand is that the body is burning more fat. It is because you're consuming more fat, but it's exogenous fat for energy. It's not coming from body fat. So the term fat burning does not mean fat loss. So you could burn fat, right? If you consume enough fat and you're burning that for energy. And you still don't have to have any fat loss from your body if you're not in a calorie deficit. So just because you eat more fats, you do burn more fats, but that's because you're consuming more fats. So you have more fat in your diet. So what he says about that not only lacks scientific support, but just by doing this completely disregards energy balance and the way the body metabolizes food.
Yeah, I think personally it's a misinterpretation of gluconeogenesis on his part, but well, that's just my opinion.
Well, for our listen,
that's more your field.
For our listeners that don't know what gluconeogenesis is, that's when the body will convert another substance into glucose to use for energy. That's basically what it is.
All right. So I really don't understand how he got so popular, and a lot of these villains that you've pointed out, except for the first one, were people that you pointed out to me. But again, I did look into this biohacking. There's no such thing as biohacking. So
Well, it's a nice magical term to,
I like the term. It sounds cool.
yeah.
But I think it goes along with magical thinking.
Yep.
Because it's a magical term,
Yep.
right? It sounds cool in theory, like a fairy tale. But he talks about different things you can do, like cryotherapy, infrared therapy, and then of course he's got supplements, right? That he can biohack your health with. And basically, again, to me, this is like somebody peddling their business essentially, that's well disguised in the guise of helping people. And to me, he doesn't look like the picture of somebody who's optimized their health. And the reason I say that is because, he sits there and says 7% body fat. And when I saw him, I was like, I don't believe that.
Yeah, no.
And then the other thing he talks about is toxins and detoxification. Listen, if anybody is claiming to detoxify you, I would be very wary about that. Chelation therapy is only indicated in certain environments, and there's really specific testing if you think that you've actually been poisoned by a toxin. A lot of my specialty actually involves looking at these environmental toxins and toxins in the workplace, for example. So please don't trust people that are randomly telling you to detoxify or avoid environmental toxins. There's no way to completely avoid environmental toxins.
Yeah.
You can maybe minimize your risk, but it's very difficult to do so.
Yeah. And then just one more claim before we move on from him, because it's one of his main ones that he always says is like he demonizes phytic acid, lectins, and oxalates. So these three compounds, they're naturally occurring compounds, and they're found in a ton of different plant-based foods. Now, they do bind to certain minerals, and they can potentially reduce their absorption, but their impact on health is way more complex than that. So, for example, cooking destroys lectins, right? So even if it could be harmful, there wouldn't be pretty much anything present in properly prepared foods like beans and like brown rice. In addition, these high lectin foods, they include raw vegetables, right? And raw vegetables are consistently associated with better long-term health outcomes. So when he sits there and he labels foods as inherently harmful, you're ignoring the full potential benefits. Like he says, like stay away from spinach because there's oxalates. Well, how many benefits does spinach provide you? Like it's almost like a pro versus con. Look at all the pros that spinach can provide you compared to the one con that it has oxalates, right? Or phytic acid or whatever he says it has in it. I don't even know. But overall, his claims, they often rely on like an oversimplification or an exaggeration. And he basically selects or cherry picks, interpretations of scientific information, and he demonizes these specific foods, and these specific compounds within foods, and then completely ignores the complexity of human nutrition and tries to simplify it to one, like a black or white, like a dichotomy. And he completely ignores the importance of having balance in your diet. So that was my dude. That was my guy that I was like, oh, he's definitely got to be on the list. It was a tough fight for number one. It was either him or the next guy that we're gonna say. And everyone who's listening to this podcast probably already knows who we're gonna talk about here. But the number one villain in the fitness industry, going around the world today,
I feel like we need drum roll or something.
is Gary Brecka. Oh, even our dog barked at that one. So Gary Brecka, you have to understand something. He, my dog really doesn't. Yeah, he does not like Gary Brecka. He is an ex-life insurance salesman. One more time, ex-life insurance salesman, right? And he's known to be a self-proclaimed human biologist, and once again, a biohacker, right? And basically, what he does is he loves to use like this scientific verbal diarrhea to make it sound like he knows what he's talking about, even though nothing he claims actually even makes sense. And we'll go into a few of his claims. Like for example, he states word, and this is word for word, nothing will burn fat more than cold water immersion. Like he said, no amount of exercise or cardio can compare to cold water immersion. I wish it was that easy. I really do. Oh my God, I would sit in cold water all day. But then he says like the same terminology with like he said he literally he contradicts himself because he said I'd never seen anything strip fat off a human being faster than his method of 30-30-30, which is like have 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking up, followed by 30 minutes of steady state cardio. So he contradicts himself there. He talks about hydrogen water and how that's the only water that should be consumed. And I'm glad that, everyone has access to, the hydrogen water and what we need to make it hydrogen water. He talks about vitamin B12 being toxic. He talks about how you need to make mother water, which is another thing, by charging your water with some wand that he has. One of my favorites is he talks about how like blending fruit is actually bad for you because the glycemic index actually quadruples. When in reality, there are research articles that say that it will actually lower the glycemic index of fruit. But to be honest with you, I'm going to just say just because you disperse the fiber does not mean you get rid of the fiber. So how does it have any effect in a negative way on the GI index?
And you told me this one, but he says that cholesterol is understudied,
Yeah.
and that there's no, I don't know if you said no peer-reviewed literature that states high
That's
cholesterol is
exactly
linked
what he said.
to cardiovascular disease, which is I think is
I think Lane did a
com
video on that too.
that's comical. And then foods with preservatives should be avoided, and organic foods are more nutrient dense than conventional foods. Not true. And the organic foods aren't sprayed with pesticides. Also not true. And this is something that I guess is a direct quote that he says. As a human biologist, he says it takes 3 minutes to liquefy lean muscle. So that doesn't make sense physiologically
Yeah, like
because,
if you go, and so that means if you work out fasted, you'll be dissolved by
yeah.
the end of your 45-minute workout.
And then he tends to simplify Hashimoto's disease.
Well, not even
Um,
simplify. He doesn't know it.
yeah. Yeah,
Like
that's true.
he
Yeah.
said that Hashimoto's is diagnosed by clinically low thyroid. But it's not. It's an autoimmune disease.
Yes. And there's more testing than just thyroid hormone.
Yes, yeah. But let's go into a few of those claims. So the 30-30-30 method for fat loss. All right. If just to make this simple, that is not going to burn fat just because you consume protein in the morning 30 minutes, right? It has to be 30 minutes after you wake up. Like if you want to have protein with your breakfast and you want to focus on having a lot of protein throughout the day, but 30 minutes after you wake up, you must have 30 grams of protein. And then you do right after that, you do 30 minutes of steady state cardio. It's a salesman like snake oil salesman like tactic to get you to think that he knows what he's talking about and that you're going to go and try it. And you're probably going to be pretty upset because it's not going to be anything different than what you're doing now. So that one, and then the blended fruit, and I touched on this before, but that's one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest things of bullshit I've ever heard because you have people who have trouble eating fruit as it is, getting their fruits and vegetables in, and now you're steering them away from blending it, and it's pushing people away from something that's extremely healthy for them and beneficial for them. Even people with like that have difficulties chewing food, like now they can't blend their fruit and get their fruit and vegetables in. So it's a bunch of crock, and he needs to be exposed. And I hope this episode sheds a little bit more light on already what's been shed about him already.
I think the biggest one for me medically is the cholesterol stuff. So, I think the first time I really saw cholesterol deposits was in vascular surgery. I was a general surgery intern and doing vascular surgery and actually looking at people's aortas, or even in pathology when we'd, do assessments on, already deceased patients. But you can actually see cholesterol deposits in major arteries. And so it is an issue. It does cause problems. It does cause heart disease. And there's tons of literature and evidence-based research in humans. And the one that comes to mind is a 2017 review, for example, that showed clinical and genetic evidence that LDL, or low density lipoproteins, cause, not just associated, cause atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. And, it's a meta-analysis of over 200 prospective cohort studies. These are randomized studies. It included more than 2 million participants with over 20 million person years of follow-up and over 150,000 cardiovascular events, that basically demonstrate a consistent dose-dependent log linear association between the absolute magnitude of exposure of vasculature to LDL-C and the risk of cardiovascular disease.
Can you say that in layman terms?
So basically, cholesterol, especially LDL, if you have high LDL levels, will cause cardiovascular disease.
Okay. So yeah, and he's out there saying that cholesterol is understudied. So, and then the funniest one by far to me was the liquefaction of muscle. Number one, as a human biologist that he claims to be, he obviously demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of human physiology and obviously muscle metabolism. But the muscle breakdown and the rebuilding of it are complex processes, and they're influenced by a ton of factors. And there is no such thing as rapid liquefaction of muscle mass. To even say that, like, I wonder if when he said that and he saw the video of him saying that, if he looked back at that and it gave him like douche chills, like, ew, I can't believe I fucking said that. Because this has to be one of and so many people trust him. But you hear this, how do you trust him after you hear something about a 3-minute muscle liquefaction?
Mm.
I don't understand it. Like the bodybuilders that we have that do fasted cardio, and you watch like Kai Green and I forgot the name of it. What was it? Irons? I can't remember it. It's a good series. But he's doing like an hour and a half of cardio with a ton of hoodies on, and he's sweating his ass off. He's on the Stairmaster and he's doing it fasted. If he's doing that for an hour and a half, how does he have so much muscle mass on him if it liquefies? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense.
So another one is the 20-minute glycogen depletion. Obviously, the body utilizes various energy sources during exercise. Glycogen depletion depends on the intensity of the exercise, duration, and individual factors, right?
Right. That's right.
So 20-minute time frame, to be kind of absolute about that, is an oversimplification.
Yeah, without a doubt. And like if your muscle cells and liver cells are full of glycogen, that's what, around 500 grams of carbs. Like you're not going to deplete that in 20 minutes.
I wish.
Yeah, you know, shit.
My cardio sessions would be a lot shorter.
But overall, so as you can hear, Gary Brecka's claims, they're riddled with pseudoscience. There's a ton of misinterpretations. There's a lot of fear mongering tactics going on. And to be honest with you, it seems like he just makes shit up and uses scientific terminology to make you want to believe what he's saying. So to be honest with you, if you are in dire need of something, as some type of health, do not rely on Gary Brecka for and drink his hydrogen water and using his mother wand, because you'll be stuck in the same spot. But that's it. So that's our top five. So just to run through them, number 5 was functional providers in general. Number 4 was Eddie Abu. Number 3 was Paul Saladino. Number 2 was Dave Asprey, and number 1 was Gary Brecka. So I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I think we're going to kind of do a spin-off of this episode too, right?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about people that maybe we look up to or trust, that might be on social media. Because I think, to first off, with demonizing anybody, it's not really about the person, it's about the information they're
Yes.
putting out. And so I want to be clear, that I'm sure a lot of these people do have good intentions. I hope they do, at least. But who are the people that we actually trust? I think that should be our next episode, to give you guys an idea of like, maybe being pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, because that's what this is too. It's social media being able to, you're able to put out whatever you want, right? And if that video goes viral and you reach millions and millions of people, and you're putting out like you need a wand for mother water, you're going to affect a bunch of people that see that. So just like Dr. Eryn said, this is not about the individual person; it's about the message that's coming out of them. That's really what we want to dismiss here. So look forward to our next episode, which is going to deal with people that we actually trust and can point you in the right direction to better health and optimizing your body composition at the same time. So on behalf of Balanced Bodies, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of the Balanced Bodies Blueprint.
We are committed to bringing valuable content. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd greatly appreciate it if you can take a moment and like it and leave a 5-star review.
On Apple, just go to the show, scroll down to the bottom and rate it there. If you're on Spotify, go to the show's page, click the 3 dots, and you can rate it there as well.
And if you believe in the power of knowledge, share this episode on your social media to try and get the information out there to as many people as possible.
And as you navigate your own path towards better health, remember that Balanced Bodies is forever in your corner. See you all next week.
The podcast content may include discussions of medical topics and health-related information. However, the information provided should not be considered exhaustive or complete, and it should not be relied upon as a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment.